So, guys, we're talking about where next, where is it going? You know, we see so many major OEMs commissioning custom builds, really top level, as well as independent builders trying to focus on new things, you know, get their own spin and doing different things. Where do you see the custom motorcycle scene going now?
I mean, shall I get the ball rolling? It's kind of
Well, you're fun, so you might as well get started.
I mean, it's a massive subject, isn't it? And I guess in my day job, I work for brands, big global brands, and they're looking for consumer behavior, consumer needs, and other bits and pieces. And it's interesting. So we talk about consumers and being tribes and and looking to answer that need scope. And I suppose motorcyclists would see themselves very much as individuals, I think, already. So you can just carve away 90% of the population and say, okay, motorcyclists are already quite unique and original. And then within the custom scene, you can pretty much take away 90% of that tribe and say, actually, there's a group there, a very small group that's quite tight, that sees itself as even more original than motorcyclists. So everyone's striving for originality, but I suppose maybe there's something, and this might get me shot, but almost in that hunt for originality, we all end up in the same space. So, and I think, and I look at my users, you might have a view on this from a social media perspective and your followings, but 33 to 45 is sort of the age band. Guys wearing jeans that may be a little bit too tight, boots that sort of a little bit rough, and a jumper that's maybe a little bit inappropriate. But, we've kind of conformed to a look and feel, but in some ways I can kind of feel already in the few years that I've been coming to the show, things are stepping up. Like we're seeing the slab sides. We're seeing a move on from, BMW R100s, CX500s, both of which I've brought, to things that are a little bit more contemporary. So taking sort of 90s, 2000 bikes and sort of, moving it on. And I also wonder if that's going to help us bring in younger riders, because we need to inspire the kids. I guess it's in some ways, the cafe racer culture is something that you almost have to be at that time of life where you can afford to do it. But there's also that inventive spirit, isn't there, where you can make something cheap better and different and personalize it. And I suppose it's how do we make that maybe more accessible to the next generation. But there are so many layers. So like we said, and talking on the way here, Callum's taking a completely different approach, isn't he, into premiumization and that sort of boutique Savile Row bike, which makes everything I've done look like a kid's project, but the execution, and that's a completely different consumer and customer. So I think lots of exciting stuff happening at the moment, I think, and it is going to keep moving and progressing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting, yeah.
I concur. All in favor?
You took my line.
I think it's, you look at trends in customization, but in the same way you look at trends in the market or in fashion or something like that, they tend to move together. You're saying whether it's the way one dresses or the style of a bike. There's a zeitgeist that everybody's paying attention to. It helps define cool as well. You want to stand out, but you also don't want to stand out too much to be seen as a bit weird or whatever. So you want to fit in that context, but as uniquely you as you can, and that's where customization is perfect, right? You've got a base motorcycle, and everybody recognizes that as cool, and you're fitting into the cool of motorcycle. And then you do your own thing to it. So your context is already set as cool. You put your individuality on top of it, it's more cool. And so then when you look at how the trends evolve, it follows those same things forward. So, and trends do tend, let's say in fashion, tend to follow like cycles of 10, 15 years or so, and certain styles will come back in. I think we see that in motorcycle right now. You're talking about slab sides and so on. Time was you couldn't give those things away, and it wasn't that long ago. And now, or the beginning of the cafe racer scene with the CB750s and so on. I remember in university, like that was the crap bike that everybody sort of handed down from year to year. It was like covered in spray paint and whatever else. And in a couple of years, it was you couldn't buy them for anything, $10,000 or whatever for one of these things that you couldn't give away before. Then it comes around, now we've got the slab sides and so on, and those sort of shifts. So if you look back about 10, 15 years, and then translate that forward, you can then see what the next trend is going to be, simply because people will be referencing that moment, that generation will be referencing that moment from their past.
Yeah, I've often thought if this happened and I've already missed the moment, whatever was cool when you were a kid You should have bought
Yeah.
the thing.
Whatever that poster was, that's probably what.
Yeah, so be that a Fizzy, be that whatever it was, and then a Renault 5 Turbo, or and just kept it box fresh, because at some point that kid gets to be a city trader. He's got millions.
Which we all
and he
think
wants...
about after the fact, generation on generation. We all think about this.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier, and it's so funny because it always feels like the current custom culture is inspired by what the people building the bikes liked as kids. The poster bike on the wall. What did you love? What came out when you were at that age, when you were most sort of impressionable? And that's the thing that inspires what you want to do now. And so in a way, I kind of almost feel like, as you said, the trends and fashions, the way it moves, we're always going to be in this cycle of, when we did our first show, there was loads of bikes referencing 60s. It was all really 60s, and then it got a little bit more 70s, and then this year you'd probably say there's quite a bit of 80s creeping in,
Yep.
and you kind of go, well, are we going to keep following this cycle? And from the shed builders and the sort of plucky amateurs having their first go at building a bike's perspective, those bikes, again, that are cheap, and if you don't mind messing them up when it goes wrong, when you get it wrong, are a good place to start.
Yeah, and it's
So-
also, I suppose you're riding the wave of what is affordable.
Yeah.
And there's that sweet spot, which is probably, what are we...
1,500 quid.
Yeah, but
What can
also
you get?
30 years
1,500
back.
quid.
And actually,
Yeah.
anything that survives past 30 years, it almost bottoms out maybe 1,500 quid. Anything that survives past that point doesn't get scrapped, cut up, or destroyed, ends up, the price escalates again, and then it's out of the price range for the custom builder to go and get, or it becomes something very unique and special, like the other shed poster bike, something that effectively could be 100 grand's worth of kit there, So yeah, and I suppose that's what it's saying. So that's probably driving. That's an invisible wave that drives actually the bikes that we'll keep seeing at every show year on year.
And I guess the thing for me about our show that I love is the different levels of bikes, and sort of celebrating them both the same, because we have probably builds in here that were put together for under £1,000, and then we've got top of the line, one-off things that are absolutely outrageous, and I love that about the custom scene. The very first show, we had a guy rock up on a Bratty CG 125, and he was talking to a guy that was there on a chopper that he'd probably spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on, and they literally were chatting for most of the day. They got on like a house on fire, and you kind of go, I love the levels of it, and I'd love to hear more about that Winston, the bikes that you build, where you're kind of going, like, almost the sky's the limit, and you get so creative. Like, where do you think you're going next with that stuff?
Well, honestly, I don't think I can speak for the whole trend thing, because as you see in my builds, I do way different style in every year. Like in the same year, I do choppers, I do coffee racer, I do this and that. I think for me, it's more about the conversation I can have with my build, with the audience. I always, like, when I build a bike for them, I talk to Adrian, it's like, okay, so what is the goal you're trying to target with your bike? So when you commission me to build a bike, how can I make that conversation more? How can I create more conversation between the brand and the customer? So that is what drives me way more than just what is trending right now, because I do all different styles all the time. The only thing I keep is it needs to look like a rock red bike. That's the only thing I keep. But I think for me, it's more like you need to embrace any style. You need to be able to appreciate any style. Like, I grew up like in the street, Japanese street biker style, bread style, that kind of small single cylinder CC bike. And then when I was in college, the biker build of Motorcycle Mania, West Coast Chopper stuff is huge. So I got all this different style kind of in my blood. So I want to do the whole time. Every day I'm thinking about all different stuff. So like any style, if you like it, just do it. And I think that the newer question is, so many people ask, like, would you do, you see like all the electric coming, would you worry about it? Like, why do you worry about it? It's just a bike. It's a bike with different engine, put it that way.
But that That is a big factor. I mean, electric motorcycles, the form is not defined by a gas tank, cylinders, exhaust, the things that a traditional motorcycle is. Do you see that as something that's going to be, exciting and new, or more hindering?
Why not? Because when, remember when you grow up, everything is two-stroke, and then now four-stroke. When four-stroke come out, everybody hate it. And when fuel injection, carburetor turns into fuel injection, everybody hate it. And now everything's fine, everybody love it. So there's always gonna be a new thing coming. You just have to embrace it. And just look at the new stuff and say, oh, what if it's me? What would I do with it? That's the fun part. And that's how I always look at new things, Whatever comes, I'll take it.
As long as it's in black, of course.
Yeah, well, have to. Yeah, have to.
In some way, though, when you say it has to feel like a rough craft bike, are there things consciously or subconsciously that make it that? Is it?
Well, at the very beginning, I think it's not really intentional. And then after a few bike, you kind of feel a pattern, like, oh, this, I have more feeling to this, like detail, that detail. And after 5 or 10 bikes, you kind of have a pattern. Oh, that works for me. And this is something I want to keep doing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of defines it. So every bike, even now I build all different platforms, all different style or direction. I try to find that it can still look like a rough road bike, even if you cover the logo. You don't see any logo, you still see, that's probably built by him.
Yeah.
Well, if you ask me what actually does that, I can't really give you an answer, but it's along the way, you kind of understand that, oh, this is something I want to keep doing. You feel more about yourself. And also the reaction from audience also help that way too. So you like people to see you with this detail. So you keep doing that. But that detail shouldn't define the shape or style or the overall direction. It's just the finalizing, the finishing of it.
Yeah, and because you're using different platforms, the platform dictates a little bit of how the bike, that's the constraints, right? And that helps you shape the form.
Yep.
Do you ever find yourself, I mean, this is something I find, although I've done a little bit of that, I'm aware that everything I do looks the same. Even through my virtual bikes and my real bikes, proportions.
That could be along all three of us, really, because that's just a pattern that happens because that's what you like, isn't it?
Yeah.
But do you find, I'm at the point now where I was almost a bit bored. And how do I move it on? Where do I go next? Because almost if I like what I like, how do you move it on?
Yeah, but if you look at what I did, it's like I did an MV Agusta with a big dustbin fairy in the front and super aggressive look. And I do like more traditional strip out bobber, but they still look like they're both built by me.
Yeah.
So like I said, the direction can be free. Like the whole overall concept can be free. But it's a detail, it's a finalized thing that make it yours.
Yeah. And I guess the custom thing, I guess at Enfield, I think you guys do this very well, but I suppose what's quite nice and always interesting seeing, obviously we can be more dynamic and we're free to do stuff and we've got less constraints with less, when you look at BMW and Triumph and those guys trying to emulate that custom scene and giving people options so that they can take a factory bike, add a few bits and pieces and make it feel unique. I think that's something that's still quite refreshing for us, I guess, is that we can kind of keep doing that and we're liberated a little bit more. But it definitely feels that that's a pattern and trend that off-the-peg bikes aren't enough anymore. There certainly seems to be a need for multiple layers of customization from a factory.
Well, it's a matter of an overall trend in society towards personalization.
Yeah.
Because of the technologies and so on, it is so much easier for people to get something that is uniquely theirs from the factory. Whether it's a pair of Nike trainers or your phone or whatever, you can get that personalized to you pretty quickly as part of the normal production process. It's a bit trickier in vehicle design because of the natures and safety and regulations and all that. But we observe this happening in society, and so we want to be part of that, and so we'll try to obviously sponsor builders for one-off builds in order to engage with that, but also taking that and attempting to produce it as much as we can. It is, like I said, it is very tricky. Even just putting a different paint scheme on for somebody, runs afoul of regulations in some countries, kind of a thing. It's very, very heavily regulated. But we want to do that more I think all the manufacturers are very much on the same page there. We all see it happening and we want to engage with that. But automotive and motorcycle, it is just very, very tricky to change things, specifically for one person.
Do you find patterns in your consumers? I mean, I'm sure you do. I guess as a designer and creative director in London, the go-to bike was a Ducati, or a Scrambler, or you could almost predetermine the person that would buy the bike because there was almost that subculture, subset of what flick switches would be.
Yeah, people fall into different categories of wants and needs and desires and so on, and you can research those demographics. I think we look at it more in a broad sense of not so much targeting, banker in London, but looking at that broader trend of what's a 35-year-old male in Europe looking for.
Yeah.
That we want to get that bigger picture because that banker in London is going to be a subset of that, and that's when your sort of personalization and customization comes in. Then we're going to maybe offer some accessories.
Yeah.
So he can buy the same bike that somebody in south of France could getting, same basic age demographic and so on. Same bike, the banker will get this other accessories that the chap in the south of France won't be getting.
Yeah.
They'll get a different set of them, and that way they personalize their base model to match their own tastes. And if we talk about the future, we see that even more, becoming more online and really getting more of those options available to our consumers. I mean, that's not even just talking about the rapid manufacturing, which will eventually become quite practical. It is not quite there yet from a vehicular standard, but that'll happen, at which point we'll be able to hopefully do even more.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's still a fine line, especially for manufacturer, to do these custom-driven bikes that if you do it too custom, then we don't need to do it anymore, which sounds good when customer can buy a custom-looking bike, but then it kind of limited the custom scene. So when custom builder don't need to do much, then it all became a cookie cutter bike. So everybody just buy the stock bike, and it looks custom anyway. But actually, when you buy a bike that looks custom, it's actually exactly the same as your neighbor do. Then it just
forces the scene forward, though, because we're inspired by the custom scene. You guys are super free to do what you like. We're not, so it's always nice to sort of pluck ideas out of there. Thank you very much. But then we do that. We're going to be inspired. We're going to include those elements in the production bike, and as Winston says, it then becomes more custom.
Well,
but then that pushes people to do something to further differentiate because that desire for personalization is still there.
Well, I think for Royal Enfield, still doing a better job because your bike is still a little more neutral kind of look. It doesn't really push that too far. So yeah, good job on that part.
Thank you.
So
Game to please.
it has become sort of in the new model playbook that we see all the major manufacturers producing commissioned builds. These are high level almost every time, but they're for the manufacturer and working within the manufacturer's parameters. How do you see that affecting custom culture as a whole?
Me?
The panel.
Yeah, I think for manufacturer to do a commission and custom build, the aim is to inspire people to want to buy it. They would see that, it's like, oh, that's cool. So it's built from here, then maybe I should buy this bike. That's exactly why I was saying that every time I build a bike with the manufacturer, I always ask them, so what is the direction you want to go with your base model? So what does my build can enhance that? Because there's so much limitation that they have with the production bike, because the production bike is supposed to aim for like this amount of people, and we don't care. We just aim for that very niche market. So we can push a little further, but at the same time, do you really want to push like really crazy, or you want to keep it kind of like, oh, it's approachable, I can do it, that kind of idea?
Yeah, so that's sort of the question is, you don't want to go too far from the form in those builds where you don't recognize the original machine underneath. Do you feel like so many builds being commissioned by OEMs limits custom builders' creativity?
for me, it doesn't. And to be honest, actually, which is probably a bad thing. Maybe I should look into things a bit more. But I just build what I love, and I don't really look at the culture at all. So I'm probably a terrible person to be on stage. But but I think for me, I've always just maybe been a bit like that, and that leads us to building quite unique bikes. I think that maybe do stand out, and hopefully then people like them. But yeah, maybe I should look a little bit more into it. But in terms of the actual bikes that manufacturers build, there's always something there. I mean, especially the Royal Enfield, that's an amazing platform for us. And so when we see, when they release the picture of that engine, the minute we see, all us builders probably see that, it's like, well, great, we're going to have something to play with here. And there's so many people who own the Enfield. And when you get on these trips and things like the rallies and stuff, it's being out on those. When I see the community around that and around those kind of bikes, it makes us really want to do some more with that as well and produce more bikes. But
have you?
Sorry. I was going to say I'm really interested in your journey, Callum, as a builder at the shows, because for a long time you were always bringing a one-of-one bike and you were building one time, one thing, and now last year and this year you've bought part of your series, and I was wanting you to sort of talk through the process of moving that one-of-one into one of 25 and the sort of thought process behind that, and then also maybe a little bit of a chat about what the next series might be.
Yeah, I mean, the one-offs were great, and we actually love building them, and especially when we bring them to the show because everyone gets to see them. But they're a huge amount of work, it's months and months of building, and especially the red bike actually, that got a lot of attention. But the kind of agreement we have with the customers, we're building one and only one, and so terrible business sense, but you build this bike, loads of people want it, and I tell them they can't have it. So we needed to take a step forward with that, and actually building this series is just, it's a lot more fun. We've built a blank canvas for people to play with. So we're getting a lot of customers come in, they'll sit in the workshop and we'll go through so many different specifications and things. And I really enjoy that, and now we're finishing a few of the series bikes. We're finding owners, wanting to get together and go for rides and things, and so there's a little community among, just the Bolex that's like starting to build, and for the future that's really exciting. I kind of imagine that, going forward, track days, little event, trips and things. That's something I really need to work on, and develop as well as the bike, because it's such a massive part, isn't it? Without the bike, well, we know what winter's like. Winter's terrible, isn't it? We lose all the community, and, well, maybe through Instagram we retain it a bit, but as soon as the sun comes out and you go for a blast with a friend or a trip's planned, it's like the best thing in the world, isn't it? Like those kind of things.
And I guess for the future of custom culture, if pro builders can't make a good business model out of this, if it doesn't make sense to do it, then you'll do something else with all your talent. So it's kind of, you have to look at it from a business perspective and go, series makes sense.
Yeah.
And so then you can keep moving forward because your business is moving forward.
And I think limited numbers is just more fun, even for the guys that own it. One-off is great, you've got the most unique thing, but it's better if you could pull up and maybe someone else has got something similar but custom, and you could share your, what you've been through with that, and just building up. We built, pretty much all my friends who have come from the motorcycle world, and it's a great thing to be a part of. I feel lucky to be involved.
I don't know if you probably know the figures, but I would imagine 80% of the builders here are doing it as a side hustle. Arguably, it's in a conversation going around of what's a bike worth. It was one of the things I put on Instagram once that just exploded, where all the big builders got involved, because it's quite a heated debate of what it's worth, the hours versus the material cost and the time. I think most people are doing it because they're passionate about it. I think what you're doing is a really great model of how do you commercialize it. And it's still, exquisite detail and beautifully done and feels limited. And the other way, I guess, is like a Thornton 100, where you pick a model and then you do something consistently.
And that's the sort of picking a model guys like Pier City Cycles in the BMW room going, the R90, we're going to do this, and we'll do the R18. We'll be one brand. We'll do servicing. We'll do all the thing, and we'll sell you one part, or we'll do the full build with an open checkbook. And that seems to me to be a thing that I'm really interested in seeing more people do with more models. Like, I was super interested in the Hedgehog guys that you've got on your stand and on the bandstand downstairs. And was chatting a bit with them last night, and he was like, Enfields are us. We're going to do Enfields. And he was sort of saying about making some of those stunning bikes. So are these going to be one-offs, or are you going to make these parts available in that sort of kit format where you might be able to go, I can get that as a kit, and I can maybe do some of it to my bike and take it to the shop and get them to finish it to this level. And I'm really excited to see more of that sort of almost kit culture a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
The XSR 900, I mean, we need to talk about that bike. Can you tell us a bit more about that bike?
I thought I could get away just spectating.
You're up.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for us. We're here with XSR 900 that's very 80s inspired. And so for me personally, I started an Instagram page that was focused on the cafe racer culture, but I quickly noticed, just being on my phone way too much, that all the different styles started melding into each other, right? So you had the CB750s, but then the Firestones, and then people started putting dual sport tires on, and people were saying that's a shit idea, and there's just like, there's so much conversation going on. What I'm excited about our current project was Cafe Racers of Instagram has allowed me to collaborate with a lot of cool builders from all over the world. And so with this project, it's with Dragos and Alex out of California. They are professionals in the custom automotive world, and then they just really love motorcycles. So being able to approach them and kind of give them a canvas to start building was really, really exciting, not only for them, but also for me, because we got to go through the build process together. And going back to just what we wish we had when we were younger, like 80s, I think is on its way into the whole neo-retro phase. And so we built a kit, we learned the whole process and had some bumps along the way, and here we are. And so we have to be able to replicate it, because this is also a charity bike. So this is, we'll say, version 1. I don't have a creative name for it yet. And then we have to do it again in California, and that's the one that's going to be given away to raise money for clean water. So from this whole Instagram page, for me, I, again, have been able to collaborate with really talented people in the community. I've followed all you guys for the longest time, and I'm just trying to replicate something that, or create a formula where we can build motorcycles, give it away for the most universal need, which is clean water, and then selfishly, I can ride to rural parts of the world delivering water filters and volunteering. So for me, that's where custom culture has taken me to the present. And you can check out the bike in the Yamaha section.
So as we do progress to newer bikes, we obviously move toward higher performance as well. How much do you see performance and rideability affecting the culture versus style and aesthetics?
I'd say we're kind of going the other direction, actually, away from performance.
You think?
Highly biased as a brand, of course, so that should be noted. But we do see, we see younger riders not caring as much about performance in the sense of speed and power. Performance in the sense of handling and usability,
Yeah.
and so on, yes. But in the sense of power and outright numbers game, we see that dropping away. And it actually keeping people away from joining the motorcycle world, because it is somehow exclusive. You know, if you're getting that, man, you've got 100 horsepower, yeah, but I've got 120, so sorry, you're not all that. If we're getting into that, that's not a fun way to have a community. You know, certainly not today. It's about getting in as many people as we possibly can. And that's one of the, I think the guys were mentioning before, that's one of the advantages of customization. It allows people to experience your brand and motorcycling in a different way. You can take a sideways view. It's not core brand, so you have a bit more freedom to play with it. And we're talking to Winston, for example. We say, yes, this is what we want, but we need this other thing, and that's what you bring to it, is that alternative vision of the brand. And I think moving forward, and we're talking about the future of customization here, that will only get more. As we look to broaden the appeal of motorcycles, customization is a really critical vehicle for doing that. As you know, because we can then target you know, if there's something in fashion that pops up, we can't respond as quickly with a production bike. It takes about 3-4 years to actually get one off the line and into consumers' hands. In a couple months, probably less than the builder would like, but anyway, in a couple months, we can have something that responds to that. We can say, look, you like that, whatever it is, well, we can give you something like that. Our bike can be that for you. And it helps people to engage with us a lot more now.
I mean, on the kit thing, I thought that's an interesting thought there, looping back onto that. Builders commercializing and trying to find, so PowerBrick are doing some really lovely stuff on the K-Series. You know, and then people said to me about that CB750 fairing, are you doing this as a kit, or that rotating headlight? And it's like, well, I wish it's just not that simple. And I think even with the stuff that PowerBrick are doing, they do that gorgeous billet subframe, but you still need to chop off the back of the K-Series with an angle grinder, weld in some tabs, get that geometry right, you know, so it's never just a plug and play. And I think people that are finding, I think Thornton's doing a really good job of literally bolt-on parts, but there's a lot of R&D in that where he's almost, you know, at productionable levels of a factory. But definitely that seems like there could be a trend and a move towards that, as I think bike builders try and find a way to how do they replicate and do this quickly, you know, make money out of it.
You might know this. How far would we be away from like an artificial bike riding experience in terms of taking something like your render and,
actually
and
experience
AI, you know, with some kind of VR headset and,
I mean,
and then the impact of that on the motorcycle community, because we might just do it all in our bedrooms and never meet up with anyone. But
yeah, I mean, it's possible, isn't it? I think that virtual bike is a bit hit and miss, but as a concept, I don't know, I have no idea. I know everyone's heavily investing in VR, aren't they, at the moment? I have a friend who's been in it for 10 years. He still doesn't know what he does. He can't tell me what he does, but he's doing something. And I think Apple and everyone have got a view that it might be game-changing. So, yeah, let's hope not.
Yeah, we want to keep it real and smelly and oily.
Smelly and oily, and yeah, exactly. I want to skin my knuckles on stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that'll always be, it was interesting, I was talking to Jonathan about his K-Series as he sort of nervously watched someone near his bike with a can of beer. You know, I think ultimately, I wondered if a lot of the builders here all suffer with some form of OCD or we're on the spectrum, certainly. And I did wonder maybe if that's a criteria for most of the builders here. I think everyone here has this sort of obsessive compulsive and this need to probably just go and build a bike, finish a bike, start a bike, and sort of go in loop. And actually that mindset, I don't think necessarily plays well into an environment where you bring in the public around all their sort of pride and joy.
Nervous all weekend.
Yeah, exactly. I think Jonathan actually nearly vaulted the gallery down into the pit to sort of keep this person away from their bike. But so I suppose that preciousness, that sort of hunt for perfection, I think we probably all have a little bit of that. It's probably what drives us, and I think that's what I find interesting.
It's quite nice being at the show though, because we all share the same.
Yeah.
Well, we go through the same pain and we share the same kind of things like that, and it's nice to share that with other people. But
absolutely, that frustration.
I think maybe we've done this sort of conversation the wrong way. I think we should be maybe interviewing you guys.
Yeah.
Who are the curators of this sort of thing. So we're talking about the show, talking about bringing everybody together. So sort of, if you don't mind, you're looking at all these things all day long. You're picking out the bikes for the show. You're popping them on the net. What is the future of customization for you? Because we'd really like to know.
yeah, then we can try and build it.
We want to get the likes and everything. So if you could just tell us what that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a brilliant thing, the submissions process that we have for the show. I mean, there's probably some guys in here that have been through it. It's a slightly clunky process, but when people submit their bikes and they send in their photos with their sort of few lines about what it is, honestly, it's really exciting every time, because you open it, you don't know what it's going to be, and then these things come in, and seeing what people are choosing to work with, the directions they're going in. And for me, I think the biggest change for us over the years has been the variety of things we're seeing. There was kind of, it felt like for a long time custom culture was pretty set in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was kind of all we had for a while, whereas I just think the breadth is much more interesting. I think we've become more open-minded to a lot of different things. I mean, there was a funny one with, I don't know if you've seen the scooter in the Dockside Gallery, and we don't, it's a different thing, scooters. We don't normally celebrate them. And the first picture that came up of that, I was like, it's a turquoise scooter. I don't get submitted many of them. And then the second picture, it had the tail popped, and it has the KTM LC4 motor in there. And you kind of go, is that a bike that people want to see at the Bike Shed show? Absolutely, because of the engineering and the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. And you kind of go, for me, it's what do the audience want to see? And people will always want to see that beautifully done R80 or that beautifully done Bonneville and the CB750s, and there will always be a place for them here. And like you guys were saying yesterday in the talk about just future, there's always going to be a place for those internal combustion things. But it's also really interesting. I'm going around in circles because I think
Yeah,
the
I'm not hearing a lot of commitment into whatever the future is here.
Yeah, but it's just...
In some ways, though, you're responsible for pushing the scene on because you are the curator, effectively. If anyone didn't get their bike in, it's because of this man. But there's...
I've had some difficult conversations over this weekend, I'll be honest.
But you sort of set the bar, and it's like, I've managed to squeeze another CX500 in, but it's almost like, we've done those. And also when I come, I look around and think, all right, okay, if I'm doing something for next year, I want to do something that's not here.
Yeah.
Maybe because it might grease the wheels with you because you can't say, well, we've had loads of those. So I suppose you should probably this is probably one of Europe's biggest shows, I guess, custom shows. Maybe I don't know. But you're pushing it on, actually, a little bit by having this event and putting us all in the same space, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's driven by our space, the venues in London and Los Angeles. They're what drive that because there's so few, whether you're into custom bikes or not, there's so few places for just bikers to go that our audience is incredibly broad. We get adventure guys coming in, we get guys on completely standard bikes coming in the commuter bikes because we're all riders and there's very few places for us all to come together. I mean, almost none. Like there's 3 places in London, and I like the way when they group as communities and we can all kind of move from one to the other because essentially we want to ride the bikes. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think it's because there's so few places and because the crowd that comes in is so broad. That's what drives the variety at the show, and I think that's what's changed my view of what a Bike Shed show bike is what the audience want to see. And that's kind of ultimately the question I ask myself when I see every bike is, does the audience want to see this bike? Yeah. Hell yeah, we'll put it in the show, we'll put it on Instagram, and we'll share it. And it's exciting because it's self-evolving.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're running a 24/7 show pretty much.
Yeah.
Here, so how's that? You talked about you started in Cafe Racers.
Started Cafe Racers.
Evolved, and so where do we see that going now? What's in now, and then how do we see that evolving?
I guess it's really hard for me to say what is in now. I think I started a page, Cafe Racers of Instagram, and I realized that it's just an appreciation for motorcycles, right? And making it your own. And going to, we'll say, different shows in America, you see also the progression of the custom builds just getting better and better and better to this point where I don't even know where it'll be in a few years because people just keep on stepping it up. Even though I run Cafe Racers of Instagram, all the builds that we've done have just, I like haters, right? So we built Bosozoku Harley Davidson. And so it's like, well, let's just push boundaries. Or we did a Cafe Racer, but then we decided to wreck it on ice because I live in Minnesota and winters are too long, so let's just do something stupid, right? And so I personally love it when I see videos where people are putting studded tires on a Ducati and ripping it up, in weird places that it shouldn't belong. So for me, that's what appeals to me. What are people doing that is unique? And then also at custom shows, I feel like it's always a surprise. Even at this show, I've tried to just skim over everything so I don't get too excited and stuck on one section, right? I don't know if I'm answering the question, but...
well, he's saying a similar thing, that they've got that craziness, those elements where you're talking about a scooter with a big old motor in it, that's very attractive to people, that's kind of fun. You're talking about studded tires on a Ducati. that sort of entertainment almost, the craziness of it is maybe what I'm getting as a common response.
Are you still making the choice? Because obviously, again, like the show is a massive important thing for builders, especially commercial building. Are you still making the final choice of what makes the grade as you curate for?
I'm trying to, but it's hard to keep up. If anything, if it says anything about the Cafe Racer trend, like the page is essentially plateaued. And I think it's because people have looked outside just this one specific styling. And so for me, I'm trying to find ways to, again, work with the community off of social media as well. I want to just be more involved with the entire process. Again, I don't know if I answered the question.
It was almost that who makes the final decision on what image goes in and what doesn't. Do you know what I mean? Which, that is quite it's a fine line,
It's
isn't
tough
He
because
wants the secret to your algorithm.
it? Yeah, no, so what do I need to do?
post it.
Ziggy Weed.
I mean, if it's all black, it always goes well.
Isn't it?
Like, that's,
I think so much of it is just that immediate wow factor. When you see it and you're just shocked at something, and it could be because you've never seen it before, it could be because it's just done so well. But if you have that moment where you're shocked, you're blown away by seeing something new and different, and you want to share it, and you want to show people, then that vibe and that energy is really contagious.
I think there's also another aspect that I learned along the way, because I came from a country that custom motorcycles there's a lot of regulation restrict. So I never be allowed to modify the frame. So that was a limitation from the beginning. And then after many years, then now I'm so used to do modified from a platform without changing the frame. And just like I mentioned, it's a conversation between the people. So when you create something that people see that, it's like, I can have that too. I have the same bike at home. What did you do? It creates that extra thing. So it's either A, you build a super crazy outrage stuff, or you create something that creates a conversation. And for me, I enjoy the latter one, but it's, I think either way it works. It just depends on which way you're going for. And at the same time, whatever the style we are talking about right now, it's actually someone did it first, like no matter how many years ago. So it's more like what we as pro builders are doing, like, okay, this is what we want to do, and what does it tell the story, and how will the audience react to it? That also might form a little bit of what the future might be.
Absolutely. And Winston, you just started your own motorcycle show locally where you're from, and congratulations, that's amazing. What, as Royal Enfield, making your own show, influencing the scene and custom builders, what do you see as being the major factors that keeps kids putting posters of motorcycles on their wall? How do we keep the next generation, engaged and into this?
I think it's, like I said, it's the reachable idea. It's like, I can do that. You need to give them that, I won't say hope, but it's like, yeah, I can do that too. Like, why not? Yeah, it's not that difficult, but actually it is. But you want to give them something like, oh, maybe I can start from an exhaust pipe. Maybe I can start from an air filter, whatever. And then, well, I put on an exhaust pipe, air filter, it's still not quite there, so what's missing? And then you learn a little bit more and more and more along the way, then that's what it is. So if every build is like crazy, super, well, I always have that example. If you go to the Louvre, you see the Mona Lisa, it's super nice, but you just turn around and go back home with nothing with you. You don't bring anything back when you see Mona Lisa. But if you say something that, oh, I might can take some back, then it's inspiring young people to start doing something on their bike. And that's what I think is very important for us that's already doing it. That's why I always mention a conversation with builds and audience that creates the story and the new generation.
I think we've seen equal responses to crazy builds and to maybe normcore builds, stuff that's not crazy. It's modified, but it's not crazy. And we see a very similar response to these. It's the stuff in the middle that we maybe doesn't have as strong of a response. Because on the one hand, it's crazy, and so you love it just because it's insane. It's what I could never do that, but it's awesome. I don't know why, but it's awesome. And then there's the other one where it's maybe just a couple bags, a nice paint job, whatever else, and it'll have just as strong a response, sometimes more so, because people are looking at that going, shit, I can do that. That's, if I got that and I got that from that builder, ooh, they're offering those bags also. So the build is not just a build, it's something, talking about the kits earlier.
Yeah.
It's a really strong response to that because of, so what Winston's saying there about the attainability of it.
So yeah.
And that's our time. So thank you guys all for coming. Thank you everybody for showing up.